Okay, we're live. All right. I think we missed a session last week, but excited to be back. Excited to be back in my office. It's been a crazy couple last few weeks of travel. So hey, how's it going? How is my audio? Give me a thumbs up if the audio is pretty good. So just let me know. But like I was saying, I'm going to go over some of the questions, and then there's an article I want to share first. So any questions that you have, throw them in the comment section here below. I'm going to be going through some comments that I've gotten over the last couple of weeks, and even some in my email box. So thanks everybody for joining this morning. But like I said, I was in New York this week, and wow, it was pretty cold. So for me, being from the Southeast, it was definitely different to have that temperature. And it was cold here too, but it's just been a crazy couple weeks of travel. So I was in the Midwest, I was in Chicago the week before, and New York this week talking AI. So it was pretty exciting, pretty interesting. Probably make some videos later on to talk some about that. So there's an article here. Let me put it in the comment section here below, where it talks about these top trends for 2019. So, I love these, what's going to happen, or what are some of the top trends for 2019 and those things. So these are kind of the ones that I'm always kind of interested in. So I think they're kind of cool to go over and kind of comment on. So today, I can see your messages. We're good to go. Thank you for joining in. If you have any questions, just let me know. But and make sure you check out the article. Like I said, so it's the top 10 trends for big data in 2019. And so I'm going to go through a few of these and comment on kind of where I see them. So I think it's pretty cool, right? Like, always interested on where, what we should be learning, where to find more ideas for what's coming, and kind of stay ahead from a data engineering perspective. So I thought this article was pretty cool. So first thing was data management is still hard. So I think a couple weeks ago, we did a live session where we're talking about how the data engineer role is changing. And it was talking about, hey, we want to get out of some of the ETL and everything like that. Well, the number one trend here is that you're still going to have to do ETL. So we're not clear on which side. Like to some extent, I think that we're going to have to do ETL for a long time, right? There are tools that can help and aid with it, but there's no end all. Like, we're never going to have to do it at this point. Data silos continue to proliferate. So this is kind of a key, talking about how we still don't really have that repository, right? Like, your data is going to exist, whether it's in your data center and it's in the cloud and on edge devices, and it's still not really centrally located, which was kind of the hope and promise that we were looking at from a Hadoop perspective. But then, as we started mature and as that market started growing, we started seeing, hey, need to be able to do in-place analytics, both on the edge and, around, where your data is at the core there too. So, number 3, streaming analytics has a breakout year. So definitely, something I've been watching for the last couple of years, been involved to some extent. And I think they changed the name, not Hadoop Summit, but a couple of years ago, I did a session around future architects for streaming analytics. So it's something I definitely see more and more as we start to look into what's going on with deep learning. We're seeing a bridging that with, hey, let's make real-time decisions as well. Data governance builds streams. That's one of those areas where, if you're looking for non-tech careers, you don't want to be a coder, maybe not an admin or systems administrator, then governance and security are some of the other areas where you can get involved in the deep learning and big data realm, but not really have to be so technical. So those are some options. It's pretty cool seeing that one come in at number 4. Skills shift as tech evolves. So just data governance and some of the other things here. So they're just talking about how the skills are going to shift. That was number 5. Number 6, deep learning gets deeper. Hey, we've been talking about that a good bit here on this channel around deep learning, and that's been one of my skill sets. Actually, just released a course. I think it was last week. Pluralsight. So it's how to get into TensorFlow using TF-Learn. So it's kind of my approach from a data engineer's perspective of, hey, what is this machine learning engineer, and kind of what do you need to know from that aspect? So not so much on the math there. Special K expands its footprint. So more about cloud native, right, with Kubernetes and what's going on from cloud native applications. So pretty cool there. Clouds are hard to ignore. We've talked a good bit on here on just kind of deciding on where your education is going to go. New tech will emerge as number 9. Number 10, my favorite, smart things everywhere, right? So IoT and what's going on from that perspective too. So check out that article if you're looking for ideas or things that you're looking for to learn. These are some of the ways that I kind of look and try to see what's coming on. So let me jump into questions here. So thanks for your patience. I'm a data quality engineer and wanted to change my career into data engineering. So that aspect. So since we're doing this live session here, can you provide a little more context? Like, do you have any kind of SQL skills, Python skills, and then what are you kind of attracted to in the data engineering realm? Do you like the systems administration side, or are you wanting to get more into coding? Just there's a couple different options from that aspect, and I can definitely give you some resources around it where you'd like to go. So, and the reason that I asked that is because I think that you're an ETL tester and I use Python. So are you liking, if you're liking going down the data engineering role and more on the developer side, and especially if you already have some Python skills, I would look into getting involved with Spark, right? So getting involved with what's going on in the Spark ecosystem. I'm a Python addict. There you go. well, you're in the right place. As far as looking into data engineering. So I would definitely go through some of the things that we have going on in the Spark community. And so let me see here. I'm going to try to provide you a link to, this is what I love about the live session is I can just give you, I can provide you a link here and give you some context and some of the things that are going on. So do you have a sandbox set up or anything like that for to test out, anything from Hadoop? And there's some, I've provided those before, but you don't have to have a sandbox to do it, but you can quickly download. So here's the Apache.Spark org site. You can go through the documentation and see some of the examples in Python. But if you're looking to, and I'll show you, so this is one of the things that I've used a good bit to just stand up and have my own environment and kind of run it around. So you can set it up in a VM, and you can also, I've ran it in Azure, and I don't know if AWS has one too, but the Hortonworks Sandbox. So if you download that, just go through the install process for that. And you can run Spark, so you can have that running. And a lot of people are going to maybe give me a hard time on this. Like, you don't have to have Hadoop to install Spark, but this is just an easy way to get access to a lot of different tools and have it automated in a little test environment that you can run on your laptop. You can run, like I said, you can run it in the cloud, however you want to. So I'd go through, install the Hortonworks sandbox there, and then start writing out some of the code. So you can go through the documentation that I sent over for the Spark. So look at some of the Python examples there and start coding up. So that's how I got started too, when we were looking at it. Oh, cool. So you're working for the AWS Big Data Specialty course? With that being said, and with your looking to get into data engineering and everything like that, maybe it makes sense. Like I said, don't have to install the Hortonworks sandbox, but there are some tools with AWS that you can start learning and start playing around with from a Spark perspective. But I would say if you're going towards the AWS certification for big data, maybe put some of the Spark stuff on the back burner and start looking at the tools like Kinesis, DynamoDB, and just kind of going through that process. So you do have HTTP3 currently installed. Okay, there you go. So you have access to Spark there to learn some of that. But you kind of got two paths here that we're looking at. So if you're trying to go for that AWS big data certification, which I believe will help you with data engineering, then maybe you want to focus more on that and making sure you're following all the changes that are going on there. Like I said, there will be a Spark component in it, but it's going to be heavy on EMR. So finding out what's going on and understanding AWS's EMR, how that integrates in with Spark, S3, all those pieces there too. So maybe to get that certification, you focus on that and then come back to, if you like the Python, like you were saying, then maybe that's when you come back and put more of a focus on Spark. Or maybe you can do both at the same time, but I like to kind of break it up and if you're going for that certification, go ahead and learn everything you need to know for that. Get that out of the way, and then start going a little bit deeper with Spark. Or maybe as you go through the certification, you find there's some other tools or other options that you're more excited about from a data engineering perspective, and that can help too. So, so my main enthusiasm is getting data into data pipelines. So yeah, so I mean, it seems like you're on track. I don't feel like you're too far away, especially having that experience from a data quality perspective and being able to go there. So, do I know something about Unity? You have to give me some more context on that. There's so many different products that are named Unity. So yeah, so and then back to the original question around data engineering. I mean, I think from the path, I mean, you're saying that you have HDP installed. So in your day-to-day job as a data quality engineer, or in the roles in your company that you're looking at, so what is the main focus? Are you guys, is your main focus on using Hortonworks, or are you guys, standardized on AWS? That's really gonna help me. That would help me decide if I were in your shoes on how I want to go. So mainly, you guys just use SQL data flow to validate the data flow. But I guess my question is so are there other data engineers in your organization, and are you guys using Hadoop? And then if you are, what are some of the tools? So Redshift. So with it being an AWS focus in your organization, then maybe I would I'm not saying don't learn Spark, but I would put most of my focus around what you originally were saying with the AWS Big Data Specialty certification. So understanding that, and you'll go through some of the pipelines, and maybe you guys are already using Kinesis to write data into Redshift and some other components, but you'll get a holistic view of that, and then that can kind of shape what you're doing. So I think from a data engineering perspective, that would be, if I were in your shoes, my focus would be getting that AWS Big Data certification, because it sounds like that's something that's going to be interesting to the people within your organization. So if you're trying to move from the data quality into the data engineering, that's where I would go. So I hope that was helpful. You can always reach back out to me on Big Data Big Questions / no, I'm sorry. I told you I'm not jet lagged, but I'm a little bit tired, I guess. But thomashenson.com / big questions. So, and then that'll come to an email box to me. And then I try to answer those as best as I can. So back to the Unity question. So the concept for the merging of the Cloudera and the Hortonworks sandboxes. Yeah. So maybe I had saw where that was called Unity, but there's so many different Unity pieces out there. So I work for Dell EMC, and so we have a product called Unity as well. And then I know that there's quite a few frameworks. So I've talked a couple different times around just kind of my thoughts on what I've taken in from the news. Some of it, a lot of it, speculation on my thoughts, what's going on. But I do know from a Cloudera and a Hortonworks perspective, they're going to hold support for 3 years for both the products, so HDP and CDH. There's still going to be development. They're still going to be supporting those, but they're also going to be merging those together. So if I'm speculating on what it's going to be, I mean, they've said out, that they're going to take the best of both products and kind of merge them in. So I don't know, man. I think Ambari's going to make it, but and maybe they've said this before, so don't beat me up if I'm missing some headlines there. But I think they're going to take a lot of the best practices and best pieces, which they've said, and kind of get in there. So, but there's always going to be people that are going to be upset about something that didn't make it. So we'll see about that. I'll need to dive in a little bit more and kind of look at it in the next, I don't know, probably the next month or two. I've been heads down in some deep learning, and I'm going through my deep learning course for Coursera, and I've got some other courses that I'm working on from a Pluralsight perspective. But I definitely plan to jump back into the data engineering piece too. So I kind of switched at the end of the year after releasing my last Hortonworks centered enterprise skills course around the Hortonworks data platform. So I switched over to TF-Learn and TensorFlow, and I've kind of been focused on that. And I've got some other things that I'm working on too. So I'll pick it back up around mid-year. So also they're going to work in the cloud. Yeah. So one of the big things and some of the announcements, and I've shared it here, and I'm not sure if you were on when I was first talking about that article for the top 10 trends to watch in 2019. Number 7 was Special K expands its footprint, and they were really just talking about cloud native and Kubernetes. But that's a big piece. You've seen a lot of releases and a lot of news coming out of Cloudera around their support for cloud native, and that's kind of really where they're going with it, right? And one of the things I was talking about when we first started today's live session is just the ability to be able to analyze your data wherever it exists, right? Like if it exists on-prem, if it exists in the cloud, if it exists on the edge. You want to be able to do the analytics there. So going down the more of the cloud native route gives them the ability to be able to do that, right? And it makes it stickier too, right? Their solution is, we want you to be able to use this anywhere where you're trying to analyze data. So what would I suggest for data engineering courses on Coursera? So I'm going down more of the machine learning on Coursera, but I will take an opportunity here to plug some of my courses. So I have specific to, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but I'm a Pluralsight author, and I've made some data engineering specific courses, and I've really branched out here lately into some of the machine learning engineers. But let me see, Thomas. I'll share a link to those, and you can see from my author page here. So I've got 6 courses that I go through, and those, especially if you're trying to get an understanding for HDFS, which that would fall in line with what you're doing from a AWS certification. Oh, sweet. Which one? Which course did you start? It's awesome. There you go. Small world. Did you start the HDFS Getting Started course? Yeah. So that's going to help you. That's going to help you with the AWS Big Data certification. So there are going to be some questions on there around HDFS. Now it's not totally, this course is going to give you an understanding of that and be able to go through it. But there's going to be some other skills that you're going to have to learn for that AWS certification. But it's a pretty in-depth piece. But that HDFS Getting Started will help out. And then, like I said, I know you're saying that mostly what you guys are doing is from a AWS perspective, but if you do get into Hortonworks and the Hortonworks data platform, I have 2 courses that follow along with that certification path. So it'll give you some of the skills that you're looking at if you're interested in that. And then the latest one that I just released was, and I put out a video this week around it, was it's an abstraction layer for TF-Learn. So I'm trying to take a data engineering's approach to figuring out what you need to do to get involved in TensorFlow. So let me jump in. I've got some more questions that I wanted to make sure that I was talking about that I was asked. So this one came in the last day or so, and it was around, let's see, I wanted to know the scope or brief of how much mathematics is used in data science and analytics. Is it complex or not, or other things? So that's a pretty, well, I mean, for data science specifically, there's a lot of math, right? Like I've talked about the difference between data engineers and the specifics around, what a data engineer is versus a data science and data scientist and what that role is. So it's a huge, a lot of math involved from a data science perspective. Now, where it gets a little bit different is really if you break down machine learning versus deep learning. And so deep learning is, what I was just talking about with, what TensorFlow, PyTorch, Cafe, a lot of the deep learning frameworks and a lot of the excitement in the last 2 years has been in the deep learning side. There's still a lot of math involved in that. That's not what, but it's not as much and not as in depth, right? It's more linear algebra. So like if you've gone through a half a semester in calculus and you understand derivatives and you understand linear algebra, then deep learning is a little bit more simple than that. But the really machine learning piece where, we're talking about algorithms and, gets pretty deep into the math. But either way, I mean, if we're talking about data scientists, then yeah, you're going to want to have a big focus on very complex math and really understand that portion of it too. And that's why, I've talked to some people, and you can see some other comments on some other videos here where there was one that says, hey, I'm a recovering data scientist. Now I'm an engineer that's chiming in. The biggest thing that I see with data scientists is that they're using scripting language for analysis. is that they know how to write their chosen language, but they typically don't do good software development, low performing code. And basically the kind of way I took that comment was, I was at AI conference in San Francisco the end of last year. And there were quite a few people that came up to me, and they were coming from the data scientist side, and they were kind of transitioning into a machine learning engineer. And one of the reasons they were going through that process was they liked coding a little bit more, right? They wanted to get into data science, and they understood, and they liked the aspect of being able to take these complex problems and figure out if they're working, but they really liked the coding part of it too. And so it's not to say that data scientists don't code. I've addressed that in a couple courses, or I'm sorry, a couple videos, but it's just the amount of coding that they're doing too. And so they wanted to be able to, hey, I want to be involved with pushing this out to production, right? Or I wanted to be involved in maintaining or, creating the code there, where the data science is more behind the scenes, but really focused on, okay, are we getting the best out of the data that we have? Are we making good predictors from our data and some of the other pieces there too? So simple answer, a lot of math if you're involved in a data scientist, and it can vary in complexity, but I would go ahead and say that you need to know both approaches, both machine learning and even deep learning approaches. So it's not an end all at this point. I was saying, oh yeah, you can just get away with maybe linear algebra and calculus. So if you're going down that data scientist route, you want to have all those tools in your tool belt. So let's see what else we got here. Let's see. Once data is transformed by the data engineer and loaded into the data warehouse, how does a data scientist, Tableau guy, or data analyst, Tableau guy, and data scientist interact with it? That's going to vary, and it's going to vary by what your organization's doing. What's your data scientist, what's your analyst, or whoever's doing any analysis of the data, what they like to do, right? And it's like we talk about big data a ton on here. But I mean, not everybody's doing big data. There's still small data, right? So there's still people out there using MATLAB, Octave, or Excel, right? And so it's going to vary on the size of the data and the tool set that you're using. And like my first project, and one of the things that I've talked about a ton is our data scientist, he had like a PhD in physics, and his tools, he would use Excel, or he would use something like MATLAB, right? He couldn't code in Python, and that just wasn't his tool set, and he wasn't even prolific in SQL to that extent. But what he was really good at was analyzing the data, right, and understanding the math behind it to say, hey, if we run, we were using singular value decomposition, and so he was able to take that algorithm, tune it, and do all the things that we needed to do. Then it was time for me to come in, and he would pass it along to me, and then we would deploy it using Mahout, right? That was a little bit more complicated, and I've talked about why I like TensorFlow and all these deep learning frameworks now, because that was more tedious than it should be, right? Like what he was doing on his machine with the tools that he was comfortable with were different algorithms once we went to distribute it and put it out in a distributed environment, right? So like just think of how you do averages over multiple different, where your data exists in multiple different containers, right? That's a different algorithm than just doing an average on your data set that's in a single silo, on your machine here. And so that's the fun, and that's the coolness about TensorFlow and other frameworks in deep learning libraries, is being able to take the same code on this machine here, not guaranteed how fast it's going to go, but then deploy it out there too. So long answer to say, if you're asking because you're a data scientist and you're familiar with certain tools, then you could be in a situation where you're going to be okay, right? But I would venture out and say, learning a little bit of Python skills if you don't already have it would be great. And then one of the big tools that I see a lot of people doing is just using the Jupyter notebooks, right? So just if you've got some coding skills there, just being able to go through that. But I will say, I mean, the most popular machine learning course is the one by Andrew Ning's machine learning, and I went through that last year, and it was all in Octave, right, or MATLAB. So that's it. Fast forward to the deep learning one that I'm going through right now, it's all in Jupyter notebooks. So it's going to vary, but don't feel like you're missing out on something. But I would definitely, if you have the opportunity and you want to learn a little bit more about coding and you don't already have that, I'd make sure that you had some of that in your background. Do I know something about the Vantage product launch by Teradata? I'm not familiar with that, to be honest. My experience with Teradata is not very deep, so I wouldn't be able to comment on it. The only thing I do know about Teradata was for a while there. I think it was their Aster was wrapped with Hortonworks, so they had some kind of partnership or something for taking their traditional data warehouse and being able to offer out Hadoop-like functionality. And I think Hortonworks was wrapped into it. So that's pretty much my only experience with Teradata. So couple more questions. Oh, I've got one here. So asking how to become a data engineer in 2019. So that's definitely going to be a video I'll shoot and I'll try to put out in the next maybe sometime this month. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then another cool comment that I had too, which it was on my top data engineering books for 2019, was that the fact that number 3 was the was the Linux Pocket Guide. So I thought that was pretty cool. Like I said, that was my list of books, but just especially from an administrative perspective, I think everybody should kind of understand, HDFS basic commands. And if you're not familiar with Linux, or even if you are familiar, you're not going to remember every command. So I used that so much when I was learning Linux, and then when I got into the Hadoop side of things, I just continued to use that because I'd forget, and the commands are so similar. So I kind of put that out there. I might change it in 2020. We'll see. I don't know. But I thought that was pretty cool. That was a nice comment. Now I had a question here too. It's pretty how to custom sort the intermediate keys output of a map phase. It's more of a Python. Okay, so it's more of a Python Hadoop streaming question. So, man, maybe I should try to do a full length video around how to just output the keys. I guess that's what we're asking. I don't know. I think that qualifies for at least some kind of demo for me to set up and kind of do on here too. So just being able to show how to extract. So another technical question here. How do you restrict users to enter name node? User is to configure with AD. You're gonna have to do some kind of mappings. So if you're configuring it to use with Active Directory, there's a. Let me see if I've got the documentation. I go through it. Let's see. I don't go deep into it in my enterprise skills course, but if you understand the user mappings and everything, once you get it integrated with Active Directory, that's what you're going to use. So let me see. Yeah. I don't have any videos related to Kinesis yet. I did just do some around DynamoDB, and I've got about 5 or 6 technical blogs on thomashenson.com going into DynamoDB. But I've got a lot of background with Kinesis, so I've thought about doing a couple of videos around that. So I think I'll be able to help out with that. Let's see. Back to the Active Directory question. If you're using Kerberos, it's a little bit complicated at first, but setting that up. But here, I'm gonna send over the documentation. So that's the documentation for authentication, but it'll go through deep on Kerberos, and I touch on that in my course. But it should show you the Active Directory piece should be fairly simple. You might have to make some kind of user mapping. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, maybe I can get a little bit deeper and look into it. So, any more questions? Let's see. So it was another question I had this week coming in. So want to do a project with Hadoop, some real-time examples. So I answered this actually in one of my Q&A questions, one of my YouTube live Q&As, where I did give some samples of data sets. So there's a ton of those out there. You can always just look, but then also I have some coding examples in my full site course, but also I have, free and available on thomashenson.com that show just how to take, pig examples, hive examples, HBase, and then a ton of stuff around the HDFS, specifically around that too. So, got a question that came in here from email. So this one is pretty This one's pretty complex, but basically it's somebody asking for advice on choosing between being an Android developer and a data scientist. And so at first I was kind of like, well, man, those are really two different fields, right? And they are to some extent. But if you really dig down into it, I think you can find a happy medium between the two. So I've talked a little bit about what we're doing from a TensorFlow.js perspective, so TensorFlow with JavaScript. But I've seen on some other channels where they've really dove into what's going on from a machine learning perspective, or deep learning and AI perspective in mobile development. So I think there's some opportunities there if you don't want to have to choose just specifically one. And I will say, you know, we're talking Android development, but I'm going to make it broader and just say, mobile device. I don't think that market is slowing down, and definitely we know that the data science market. So choosing either one, I don't think you're putting yourself in a bad situation. And I mean, life is long, I mean, the careers are long, right? Like, I know, it's, time is precious, and you always feel like you don't want to make the wrong mistake, because how are you going to recover for it too? But I mean, there's a ton of people that remake themselves throughout the year. So, I mean, throughout time. So if you're in high school or if you're in college, man, pick something that you're interested in right now, and, go down that path. And if you don't like it, I mean, we're talking here about, hey, people transitioning at different points in their career to other things. Like, technologies are going to change, and it's okay, right? It's okay to have multiple different interests, and it's okay to, try something out. So maybe you go down the mobile development for 2 or 3 years, and, maybe there's an opportunity to do something data science related in that, maybe not, but you're not, I don't feel like you're boxing yourself in either way. So, which product is best if I want to achieve record update in Hadoop, since Hive does not support updates? Hmm. What are you specifically trying to do besides? I mean, they're working on it from a Hive perspective, but I think I kind of understand. Like, you're looking for more functionality from a database perspective, or kind of what's the broader use cases? Because I mean, I could say, hey, you could do something with HBase. That's where, especially, from a Cloudera perspective, that's kind of where they were hoping that, Kudu would provide that functionality. But there's a ton of other SQL on Hadoop that are really trying to go after that area. So you're not just boxed in. I mean, obviously you can't. Yeah, you're not going to be able to do it from a Hadoop perspective. In that aspect, but that's where, these higher level tools. So I mean, Hive's trying to get down to that point from that perspective, but yeah, you were trying, yeah, several, yeah. So you're trying, but there's several restrictions. But yeah, that's one of those I think a lot of people are trying to tackle. So I guess I'm going to give you a non-answer and be like, hey, there's a lot of different options, but every one of them have kind of their caveat, right, around that, and that's kind of where we're seeing it. And depending on the use case, so I'll tell you, I mean, it's been a while since I went down this project path, but my first project we were working on, we kind of had that, and so we used Hadoop and everything to do our analytics and to do run the Hout and do everything like that. But I mean, we still had a need for a database, right? We still had a need for a database for our dashboards and everything like that. Now, they were updated pretty frequently, right? I think, and that's kind of that was kind of our bridge. But I think there are a lot of tools. Like I said, there's several restrictions. You're not Everything has restrictions, I will say, but this is one area there's a big need, and this is why there's so many different tools, right? So I don't know. I don't have much experience with Impala, but if looking at what Impala has, Presto, a lot of different SQL and Hadoop tools, but every one of them is going to have some kind of restriction. Everyone's going to have some kind of functionality. And maybe back to an earlier question we were talking about, maybe that's where Unity comes in and helps with bringing the best of these to kind of solve those problems. So sorry, I couldn't be of more help there. So, all right, everybody, have an amazing weekend. If you have any questions, make sure you put them in the comment section here below if you're watching this after the fact, and I will do my best to answer them on the next episode of Big Data Big Questions, or on our next live session. So enjoy your Super Bowl weekend, everybody. maybe the weather will hold out, even though it's February. So thank you to everybody. Have a good weekend.